Her father hit her at Thanksgiving right in front of the people who claimed to love her. No one stood up. No one said a word. Claire Bennett had spent years learning how to survive rooms like this. Stay quiet, read the danger, never make things worse. But that night, with her cheek burning and the dinner table frozen in silence, something inside her finally broke. Then the doorbell rang. Standing outside in the cold was Julian Moretti, the most feared Mafia boss in Philadelphia. He came to collect a debt from her father. Instead, he was about to offer Claire a choice that would pull her into a world of power, betrayal, danger, and a kind of love she never believed she deserved. Stay with this story, because sometimes freedom begins where fear ends. Like the video and comment where you're watching from. Claire did not know whether freedom had begun when the doorbell rang. All she knew was that for the first time in years, someone had placed a choice in front of her and had not tried to make it for her. At 1:13 in the morning, she stood beside the narrow window of her childhood bedroom with Julian Moretti's cream-colored card in one hand and her phone in the other. Outside, Upper Darby had gone quiet. Rain slid down the glass in thin silver lines. A porch light across the street flickered above an empty driveway. Somewhere beyond the houses, tires hissed over wet pavement and disappeared into the dark. Behind Claire, nothing had changed. The same faded wallpaper. The same bookshelf her mother had bought at a yard sale when Claire was 12. The same crack running across the ceiling above the closet. Even the house seemed to believe she was still the girl who had learned to listen for the sound of her father's footsteps before deciding whether it was safe to leave her room. Her cheek throbbed. She pressed 2 fingers lightly against the swelling. Then she looked at the phone number again. She called. Julian answered after 2 rings. "Claire." She stiffened. He did not say hello. He did not ask who was calling. He already knew. "I have questions," she said. His voice came through low and steady. "Then ask every one of them." Claire sat on the edge of the bed. She had expected pressure, maybe charm, maybe the kind of controlled intimidation men like Julian Moretti probably used when they wanted someone to agree before realizing they had agreed. Instead, he waited. She looked at the bedroom door to make sure it was closed. "If I accept this job, can I leave the property?" "Yes. Whenever I want." "Within reason if there is a security issue, but yes." "Do I keep my phone?" "Of course." "Can I contact my family?" "That is your decision." "Can I quit?" "Yes." "What happens to my father's debt if I quit?" "That depends on how long you stay." Claire frowned. "That was not what you said downstairs." "No. Downstairs I gave you the simplest version. So give me the complicated one." There was a pause. Not irritation, something closer to approval. "If you sign the contract, the debt reduction will be proportional. 30 days completed, 1/3 removed. 60 days, 2/3. 90 days, all of it. And if you fire me, the same formula." Claire looked down at the card. "What exactly does Executive Operations Assistant mean? Scheduling, correspondence, contract organization, vendor communication, travel coordination, internal administrative work." "Illegal work." Another pause, longer this time. "You will not be asked to commit a crime." "That is not what I asked." His voice remained calm. "No, it isn't." Claire waited. Finally, Julian said, "Some of the businesses around me exist in areas where discretion matters. You may see names you recognize. You may see information other people would pay to obtain. You will be expected to keep private information private." That sounds like a very polished way of saying yes. "It is the most accurate answer I can give you at 1 in the morning over an unsecured phone." She almost smiled. Almost. "Do I get paid?" "Yes." "How much?" He named a number. Claire sat straighter. It was almost twice what she made at her current job. "You are serious." "I generally am." She looked toward the bedroom door again. Downstairs a cabinet opened, then closed. Her father was still awake, probably looking for another bottle. Claire lowered her voice. "Why me?" This time Julian did not answer immediately. The silence between them stretched long enough that Claire wondered if the call had dropped. Then he said, "Because everyone at that table knew what had happened before I walked into the house." Claire said nothing. They knew what your father was doing, Julian continued. They knew what he had probably done before. They were all pretending the situation was something else. Claire's fingers tightened around the card. And I wasn't, no. What was I doing? Enduring it. The word landed differently than she expected. She looked at her reflection in the black window. Bruised cheek, tired eyes, shoulders held too tight. Julian's voice softened, but only slightly. You were also the only person in that room watching everything. Claire frowned. Watching what? Everyone. She stopped breathing for a moment. He had noticed that. Nobody noticed that. At work, people called her organized, efficient, reliable. Her supervisor once joked that Claire could walk into a burning office and make a spreadsheet before anyone found the fire extinguisher. They thought it was personality. It wasn't. Claire had learned organization because chaos had consequences. When she was 8, organization meant knowing which cabinet her father slammed when he had been drinking. At 11, it meant remembering which utility bill had not been paid so she could prepare for the electricity to disappear. At 14, it meant understanding that the angle of Douglas Bennett's shoulders could tell her whether answering a question would calm him or make things worse. By adulthood, she could walk into a conference room and know within 30 seconds who had missed a deadline, who was lying about it, and which problem would explode first. Survival had become a resume. Julian said, "What do you do now?" Claire blinked. You know what I do. I know your title. I am asking what you actually do. She leaned against the wall. Operations coordinator for a construction management company. What does that mean? It means 6 project managers create problems and I make them disappear before the clients notice. A quiet breath came through the phone. It might have been laughter. That sounds useful. It is. Then you understand why I asked. Claire looked down at the card again. You researched me. I knew your father's family before I came to collect. How much do you know? Enough to know you have a business degree from Temple. Enough to know you've been at your company 4 years. Enough to know your supervisor trusts you with contracts he should probably read himself. Claire stood. The room suddenly felt smaller. That is invasive. Yes. At least he did not pretend otherwise. Claire walked to the window. If I say no, then you say no. And my father, his debt remains his problem. She closed her eyes. There it was, the trap that was not a trap. She could walk away. Douglas could deal with the consequences of Douglas's choices. A thought that should have felt obvious felt almost revolutionary. Julian spoke again. I can send the contract for you to review before you decide. Claire opened her eyes. Now. I am not giving you my email. You do not need to. The number you called from is enough. Claire pulled the phone away and stared at it. A message arrived while they were still speaking. A secure link. She almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. Do you ever do anything normally? I answered the phone. At 1:13 in the morning. You called me. That time she did smile. Small, unwilling, real. Claire sat back down. I am not agreeing tonight. I did not ask you to. I will read everything. You should. I may have an attorney review it. You should do that too. She frowned. He was making it very difficult to distrust the conversation in the way she wanted to. Good night, Mr. Moretti. Good night, Claire. She hesitated, then ended the call. For several seconds she held the phone against her palm. Downstairs glass broke. Claire flinched automatically. Her body moved before thought. Shoulders tight, breath shallow, eyes on the bedroom door. Then she heard Douglas mutter something and stumble toward the living room. Claire stared at the closed door. 27 years old, college degree, steady job, apartment of her own in West Philadelphia, and one sound from downstairs could still reduce her nervous system to 14. She opened Julian's contract. 14 pages. She read all of them. At 2:30 she made notes. At 3:10 she looked up Pennsylvania contract law on her laptop. At 4 she opened the website of an attorney she had used once when her employer tried to slip an unreasonable confidentiality agreement into a promotion package. At 5:15 she was still awake. The rain had stopped. She heard her father moving through the kitchen below, a cabinet door, coffee, keys. Then the back door opened. Douglas's truck started in the driveway. Claire waited until the engine faded down the street. Only then did her lungs loosen. At 7, she went downstairs. Evelyn was already sitting at the kitchen table. Her grandmother held a mug between both hands. She looked older in the morning light, not weak, just tired in a way that seemed accumulated over decades. Her eyes moved immediately to Claire's cheek. Purple had formed along the bone. Neither woman spoke for several seconds. Then Evelyn said, "He should not have done that." Claire opened the refrigerator. "No. I should have said something." Claire took out the milk. "Yes." The word stopped Evelyn. Claire did not turn around. She poured milk into a mug and added coffee. Behind her, Evelyn whispered, "I was afraid." Claire looked down at the dark surface of the drink. "So was I." There was no cruelty in her voice. That made it worse. Evelyn lowered her eyes. Claire carried the mug to the table and sat across from her. "I may be leaving for a while." Her grandmother looked up. "With that man, to work for him." "Claire, I read the contract. That does not make it safe." "No." Evelyn searched her face. "Do you know what people say about Julian Moretti?" Claire touched her bruised cheek. "I know what people say about Dad, too." Silence. Evelyn's mouth tightened. Claire immediately regretted the sharpness, then realized regret did not mean the words were wrong. "I am not running away with him," Claire said. "I am taking a job." "Because of Douglas's debt?" "Partly." "And the other part?" Claire looked toward the dining room. The Thanksgiving plates had been cleared, but one wine stain remained on the tablecloth. The chair where her father had sat was pushed back at an angle. "The other part is that I don't want to wake up here tomorrow." Evelyn looked at her for a long time. Then she nodded once. Not approval, not permission, just recognition. Claire finished her coffee. At 8:15 she packed. It took less time than she expected. 2 pairs of jeans, work clothes, sweaters, shoes, her mother's old silver necklace, 3 books, laptop, toiletries. Everything that felt necessary fit inside one duffel bag and a shoulder tote. Claire stood in the center of her childhood room staring at the bag. 27 years of history. 1 piece of luggage. She could not decide whether that was tragic or freeing. At 8:47, she sent Julian a message. "I want to discuss 3 contract provisions before I sign." His answer arrived 30 seconds later. "Good." A second message followed. "Car arrives at 9. Claire stared at the word good. Not agreed. Not difficult. Good. She slipped the phone into her coat pocket. At 8:58, she walked outside. Cold air struck her face. The neighborhood looked painfully ordinary. Wet leaves stuck to the sidewalk. A delivery truck idled near the corner. Someone 2 houses down dragged trash bins toward a garage. No music. No dramatic goodbye. Just a gray Pennsylvania morning. A black sedan turned onto the street. Claire's stomach tightened. It stopped in front of the house. The driver stepped out. Young, maybe 30, dark suit, polite expression. "Ms. Bennett." "Claire is fine." He opened the back door. Claire looked once at the house. Not because she wanted to stay, because she wanted to know what leaving felt like. Nothing happened. The house did not call her back. No invisible chain tightened around her chest. It remained exactly what it had always been. Brick, glass, old siding, memories trapped inside walls. Claire got into the car. The driver placed her bag in the trunk. Then they pulled away. Upper Darby disappeared behind them. The city changed gradually through the windows. Row houses, traffic, the skyline rising in the distance. Then the roads widened as they moved toward the main line. Claire watched everything. She counted turns without meaning to, not because she planned to escape, because knowing where she was had always made her feel safer. The driver noticed her watching street signs in the mirror. "You want the route on your phone?" he asked. Claire looked at him. "You are allowed to know where you're going," he said. She almost laughed at the absurdity of how much that sentence affected her. "Yes." He told her the address. Claire entered it into her phone. Gladwin. 40 minutes later, tall trees began replacing commercial streets. Stone walls appeared behind stretches of winter brown grass. The sedan turned onto a private road. Security cameras watched from discreet positions among the trees. At the end of the drive stood a house that was large without trying to announce itself. Gray stone, dark windows, a broad front entrance. 2 men stood near the steps. Claire expected guns to be obvious. They were not. That somehow made the men more intimidating. The sedan stopped. The front door opened. Julian stepped outside. He was not wearing the black suit from the night before. Dark trousers, white shirt with the sleeves rolled once. No tie. He came down the steps as Claire climbed out. His eyes went immediately to her face. The bruise. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Morning." "Morning. Did you sleep?" "No." "I assume not." The driver retrieved her bag. Claire reached for it. Julian did not take it from her. He simply stepped aside. "Come inside." Warm air met her at the door. The house smelled faintly of coffee and cedar. Claire expected luxury. She found order. Dark wooden floors, bookshelves, old photographs, a coat tossed over the back of a chair, a newspaper folded beside a coffee cup. The place looked lived in. That surprised her more than marble would have. A woman approached from the hall. She was in her 50s. Broad-shouldered dark hair threaded with gray expression sharp enough to make introductions unnecessary. "Teresa Romano," Julian said. "She manages the house." Teresa looked Claire over, not rudely, thoroughly. Her gaze stopped on the bruise. "Kitchen has ice." Claire blinked. "Thank you." Teresa turned to Julian. "Your 9:30 moved to 10. Why?" "Because I moved it." Julian stared at her. Teresa stared back. Then Julian nodded. Claire almost smiled. Teresa noticed. "Come on," she said. "I'll show you your room before he remembers he owns the place." "I heard that," Julian said. "You were meant to." Claire followed Teresa upstairs. Her suite occupied the east side of the second floor. Bedroom, bathroom, small sitting room, desk facing a wide window. On the desk sat a new laptop still in its box, legal pads, pens, and a printed copy of the contract. Claire stopped. "Mr. Moretti had those brought in this morning," Teresa said. "He assumed I was coming." "No." Teresa walked to the bathroom cabinet. "He assumed if you came you would need to work." That distinction stayed with Claire. At 11:30 she entered Julian's office carrying the contract. It was simpler than she expected. Desk, bookshelves, 2 chairs, no trophies, no weapons displayed on walls, no attempt to impress anyone. Julian gestured toward the chair across from him. Claire sat. "I have 3 changes." "Let's hear them." She opened the contract. "Confidentiality. 24 months is excessive. I want 18. "Why?" "Because after 18 months, anything operational I know should be obsolete. If it isn't, your organization has larger problems." Julian stared at her for a second, then picked up a pen. 18. Claire continued. "Vehicle access. It says 24 hours notice. For security. I want 4. 6. 4. Julian leaned back. 5. Claire considered. "Fine." He changed it. 3rd. The termination clause. She slid the contract toward him. "If you terminate me on day 80, only 80 days of the debt should remain eligible for reduction. The current language gives you discretion." I wasn't planning to use it. "I do not sign contracts based on what someone plans to do." Something shifted in Julian's expression. A hint of respect, maybe amusement. He revised the clause. Claire read the new language. "Better. You negotiate everything, only things that can hurt me." Julian's eyes held hers. For a moment the room became strangely quiet. Then he signed. Claire signed after him. He handed her 1 copy. 90 days. 90 days. No obligation after that. None. She closed the folder. "What is my first assignment?" Julian stood. "Come with me." Her office was next to his, smaller. Window facing the gardens, desk already connected to 3 monitors. Claire looked at the screens, then at Julian. "What happened here?" "My previous assistant left." "I can see that." Calendars overlapped across 3 platforms. Vendor emails had gone unanswered. Contract folders were mislabeled. Meeting notes existed in 5 different formats. One appointment appeared twice on the same afternoon in 2 locations. Claire sat slowly. "This is not disorganization." Julian leaned against the doorframe. "No. This is an administrative homicide." For the first time, Julian Moretti smiled. Not much, But enough. Claire looked back at the screen before he could see that she had noticed. By 4, she had identified 17 scheduling conflicts. By 5, she had created a priority system. By 6, she had found 3 unsigned vendor amendments and 1 contract extension that should have been executed 9 days earlier. Work did what work had always done for Claire. It narrowed the world. Problems became shapes. Shapes became sequences. Sequences became solutions. At 7, Teresa appeared in the doorway. "Dinner." Claire looked at the time. "I didn't realize." "Nobody who sits at that desk ever does." Dinner was served in a long room overlooking the dark grounds. Julian sat at one end, Teresa at the other. A broad man with close-cropped hair sat across from Claire. "Marco Hayes," he said. "Claire Bennett." "I know." She raised an eyebrow. Marco took a sip of water. Small house. The estate had at least 20 rooms. Claire almost laughed. The meal was simple. Roast chicken, potatoes, bread, wine. No one interrogated her. No one asked why Douglas hit her. No one asked whether she was grateful Julian had appeared. Marco complained about a contractor who had installed the wrong security hardware. Teresa told him it was because he ordered the wrong model. Marco insisted he had not. Teresa produced the purchase order from memory. Julian ate while they argued. Claire watched. These people were supposed to frighten her. Instead, for the first time in years, she sat at a dinner table where disagreement did not feel like the beginning of violence. Julian looked across at her. "You found the Thursday conflict." Claire set down her fork. 2 of them. "Anything important?" "One meeting at 2 has no company attached, only a name." Julian's expression changed. "Which name?" "Santoro." Marco stopped eating, only for a second. Claire noticed. Julian did too. "Leave that one alone," he said. "All right." No explanation. Claire did not ask for one. Later in her room, she stood beside the window looking over the dark grounds. The bruise in her reflection had deepened, purple along the cheekbone, yellow near the edge. She touched it once, then lowered her hand. Her phone buzzed. A message from Evelyn. "Are you safe?" Claire looked around the quiet room, at the locked door she controlled, at the phone no one had taken, at the contract sitting on the desk with her handwritten revisions, at the car access clause she had negotiated herself. She typed back, "Yes." For the first time in a long while, the word did not feel like something she was saying to make another person feel better. 3 floors below, Julian stood alone in his office reading the contract again. Across town, Douglas Bennett sat in a parked truck behind a closed liquor store phone pressed to his ear. His hands were shaking. "She took the job," he said. A man's voice answered through the speaker. "You're certain?" "I watched the car take her." Silence. Then the voice said, "Good." Douglas swallowed. "What happens to my debt?" The man laughed quietly. "That depends on how useful your daughter becomes." Douglas stared through the windshield into the empty parking lot. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he asked the question that mattered most to him. "What do you need me to do?" The answer Douglas Bennett received that night was simple. Nothing yet. He sat in the truck with the engine off the windshield fogging slowly in front of him. "What does that mean?" "It means you wait until she trusts you enough to answer the phone." Douglas tightened his grip around the steering wheel. "She blocked me." "Then give her a reason to unblock you." The line went silent for a moment. Douglas looked across the empty parking lot at the liquor store sign, glowing red against the wet pavement. "And if she doesn't?" The man on the phone sounded almost amused. "Then we find another way inside." The call ended. Douglas remained in the truck for another 10 minutes. He told himself he was protecting Claire. He told himself Julian Moretti had manipulated her. He told himself any father would be worried if his daughter moved into the home of a man whose name made half the city lower its voice. He did not tell himself the truth. The truth was that someone had finally taken Claire somewhere Douglas could not reach her. And he could not stand it. At the Moretti estate, Claire woke before 6. For a few seconds she did not know where she was. Then she saw the wide windows, the dark furniture, the pale gray sky beyond the glass. Memory returned quietly. The contract, the estate, Julian. She sat up and listened. Nothing. No television downstairs. No cabinet doors slamming, no heavy footsteps pausing outside her room. Silence. Her body did not trust it. She showered, dressed, and went downstairs at 6:20. The kitchen lights were already on. Teresa stood at the counter making coffee. "You always wake up this early?" Claire asked. Teresa poured a cup. "I live with men who think breakfast meetings are evidence of character." Claire accepted the coffee. "Thank you. Do not thank me yet. That pot may strip paint." Claire took a sip. It was strong enough to make her blink. Teresa smiled slightly. "See?" At 6:32 Julian entered. Dark suit, no tie, coffee in one hand. He looked at Claire, then at the clock. "You are early. So are you. I live here. So do I temporarily." Something almost moved at the corner of his mouth. Claire followed him to the office. By 8 she had reorganized the main calendar. By 10 she had created a separate priority list for contract reviews. By noon she had found a problem. She turned one of the monitors toward Julian. "You have 2 meetings Thursday at 2. Julian came around the desk. One meeting was listed with a development attorney downtown. The other had no company, no address, and only one name. Santoro. Julian stood still. Claire had already begun learning that his stillness meant something. Most people became louder when pressure increased. Julian became quieter. "Leave Santoro where he is," he said. "Then the attorney gets moved." Friday morning. Claire clicked the calendar. Done. Julian did not leave. She looked up. "Something else." "What made you flag it? The entry style." He glanced at the screen. "Explain. Everything else in your calendar has context, company, location, at least one backup contact. Santoro has none of that." She pointed to the entry. Someone wanted it remembered without documenting what it was. Julian studied her. "Good." Claire leaned back. "That word sounds more alarming every time you say it." It was a compliment. "From you, I am still evaluating the difference." This time he did smile. Barely. Then he walked back into his office. Claire watched him go. She hated that she noticed the smile. She hated more that she wanted to see it again. The first week passed quickly. By Wednesday, Claire had reduced the scheduling conflicts by half. By Thursday, she had found 4 vendor contracts with missing compliance language. By Friday, she had discovered a pattern in unanswered correspondence from a man named Eddie Russo. The messages began casually, checking in, following up, need an answer. Then the tone shifted. "Call me. We need to discuss this. Do not make me come there." Claire printed the last 3 and took them to Julian. He read them standing beside her desk. "How long has he been waiting?" 21 days. Julian looked at the final page. "Anything else unusual?" "The tone." He is impatient. "No." Julian looked at her. Claire tapped the paper. "Impatient people usually get louder. He is getting more controlled." Julian read the message again. Claire continued. "The first emails are emotional. The last one sounds deliberate." Julian folded the page once. "I will handle it." Claire nodded. He moved toward the door. "Julian?" He stopped. It was the first time she had used his first name. The word had left her mouth before she decided to say it. His eyes returned to her. Claire almost corrected herself. She did not. "Do I need to change anything on the calendar because of this?" "No." "All right." He remained still for 1 second longer. Then he left. Claire stared at the doorway after he was gone. She told herself the strange feeling in her chest came from using the wrong form of address. It was easier than examining the alternative. That evening, dinner was louder than usual. Marco had spent most of the day arguing with a security contractor. Teresa thought the situation was funny. Marco did not. "He installed the wrong camera system on the east gate. You approved the invoice," Teresa said. "I approved the quote. You signed the invoice too." "I was busy." "That does not make the ink less yours." Claire looked down at her plate to hide a smile. Julian saw it. "Something amusing." Claire looked up. "Nothing." Marco pointed his fork at Teresa. "She has been waiting all day to say that." "I have been waiting 3 years." Claire laughed. The sound surprised her. Not because anything was particularly funny, because laughter at dinner had once felt dangerous. At home, laughing at the wrong moment could be interpreted as disrespect. Laughing too loudly could attract attention. At Julian's table, nobody stopped talking. Nobody looked offended. Nothing bad followed. Claire's laughter faded naturally instead of being swallowed. Later that night, she stood in her bathroom brushing her teeth when she realized she had gone an entire day without thinking about the bruise. She leaned toward the mirror. The purple had started turning yellow at the edges. Healing. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. Claire stared at it. The call stopped. Then another came. Same number. She let it ring. A voicemail notification appeared. Claire almost deleted it without listening. Instead, she pressed play. Her father's voice filled the room. "Claire, call me back. I know you're angry. I know things got out of hand, but you need to understand who you're dealing with. Moretti is not your friend. Men like him do not give things away. He is using you. Call me." The message ended. Claire stood still. Her first reaction came from an old place. Guilt. Maybe she should call. Maybe Douglas was afraid. Maybe this was the closest he knew how to come to apologizing. Then she replayed the message. Not once had he said he was sorry. Not once had he mentioned hitting her. He had turned himself into the worried father and Julian into the danger. Claire deleted the voicemail. She blocked the number. Then she went to sleep. The following Thursday brought the Santoro meeting. Julian left the estate at 1:15 with Marco and 2 other men Claire had seen around the property, but had never been introduced to. The house felt different after they left. Not empty, alert. Claire stayed in her office. She worked through a stack of contracts and told herself she had no reason to wonder what the meeting involved. At 4:40, engine sounded outside. Claire looked through the window. 2 black SUVs stopped near the entrance. Julian got out of the first. Marco followed. Julian's jacket was open. There was blood along the left side of his jaw. Not much. Enough. Claire stood before she realized she was standing. She heard voices in the hall. Low, fast, then silence. 5 minutes later, Julian walked into her office. He had removed the jacket. The cut was clean and narrow. He looked as calm as he had when he left. "Do you have the riverfront operating agreement?" Claire did not ask about the blood. She opened a file drawer. "Original or amended?" "Original." She handed him the document. Julian opened to the middle. "Arbitration clause." "Section 8. He looked at her. Claire continued. "Any dispute goes to an agreed third party within 30 days of written notice. Neither side has unilateral enforcement rights." Julian found the page. His eyes moved over the text. "You memorized it. I read it 4 times. He closed the file. Claire looked at the cut again. "Santoro." Julian said nothing. Claire folded her hands on the desk. "I am not asking what happened." His gaze sharpened slightly. "I am asking whether what happened changes anything I need to manage." Julian considered her for a moment. "Possibly. Today? No. This week? Maybe." Claire opened her calendar. "I will clear a contingency block Friday afternoon." Julian nodded. Then Claire picked up the printed Eddie Russo messages. "Take these too." Julian's attention shifted. "Why?" "Because the last message arrived yesterday." He took the page. Claire watched his face as he read. Nothing dramatic changed. That was what made it noticeable. His entire body seemed to settle into focus. When 4:17, who else saw it? No one. Julian folded the message and placed it inside the operating agreement. "Clear Friday from 2 to 5. Done." He moved toward the door. Claire spoke before he reached it. "You should clean that cut." Julian touched his jaw as though he had forgotten it existed. "It is clean." "Then you should stop touching it." He looked at her. For a moment, neither said anything. Then Julian lowered his hand. "Yes, ma'am." Claire stared at him. He left before she could respond. She waited until the door closed. Then she laughed under her breath. The second week felt different. The work became easier. The house became familiar. Marco began leaving files on Claire's desk without explaining where they came from. Teresa stopped asking whether Claire wanted dinner and started telling her when dinner was ready. A man named Nate, who worked security, learned that Claire preferred the front gate camera reports sorted by time rather than location. No one announced that she had become part of the rhythm. It simply happened. And through all of it, Julian remained the most difficult thing in the house to understand. He never raised his voice, never touched Claire casually. never used his power to pull attention toward himself. He listened when people spoke. He remembered details. When Teresa mentioned that her sister needed surgery, Julian rearranged a meeting so Teresa could leave early without asking. When Marco received a call from his mother during dinner, Julian told him to take it. When one of the groundskeepers broke a window in the garage, Julian asked if he was injured before he asked what happened. Claire noticed everything. She did not want to. At least, that was what she told herself. One Wednesday night, she woke at 11:20 and could not get back to sleep. The estate was quiet. Claire went downstairs for water. A light glowed in the kitchen. Julian stood at the counter wearing gray sweatpants and a black t-shirt. No suit, no watch, no jacket. He looked younger, not softer, just less protected. He turned as Claire entered. Couldn't sleep. She opened a cabinet. Could ask you the same thing. I asked first. Claire poured water. Occupational habit. What occupation? Thinking. Julian leaned back against the counter. Sounds exhausting. It is. Claire took a drink. Then she noticed music. Low, piano. It drifted faintly from somewhere down the east hall. Claire looked toward the doorway. I've heard that before. Julian followed her gaze. The piano. Yes. He went quiet. Claire immediately regretted asking. You don't have to explain. It's my mother's. Claire looked back at him. The piano was. He stared at the glass in his hand. She died when I was 12. Claire waited. Julian continued because she did not force him to. She played every night, usually after everyone else went to bed. Do you play badly? Claire smiled. I do not believe you admit being bad at many things. I am secure enough to acknowledge the evidence. She leaned against the opposite counter. Why keep it? Julian looked down the dark hallway. Because the house sounds different without it. Something in Claire's chest tightened. She understood that kind of sentence. My mother sang. Julian looked at her. Claire stared into her glass. Mostly when my father wasn't home. She had not planned to say it. Once she had the memory arrived fully, her mother standing at the kitchen sink, barefoot, radio playing, soft voice following an old Motown song, Claire doing homework at the table, Douglas working late, the whole house lighter because one person was missing from it. My mom died when I was 16, Claire said. Julian said nothing. She was sick for a long time. Before that, she spent most of her life trying to keep my father calm. Claire gave a small, humorless smile. After she died, I inherited the position. Julian's jaw tightened. You were 16. Yes, that was not your responsibility. I know that now. Julian studied her. Claire looked away first. For years, she had kept returning to the Bennett house on birthdays and holidays. She had told herself it was because Douglas was her father. Sitting there in Julian's kitchen, she realized that was only partly true. She had been returning to rooms where her mother still existed in fragments. The blue bowl she used for bread dough, the chipped mug she drank coffee from, the dent in the hallway wall from the Christmas tree they dropped when Claire was 10. She had confused memory with obligation. Julian spoke quietly. Do you miss her? Every day. He nodded. Me too. No performance. No comforting speech. Just two people standing in a kitchen after midnight, each carrying the shape of someone who was gone. Claire finished her water. Good night, Julian. Good night, Claire. She reached the doorway. Your piano is not that bad. He looked offended. You have never heard me play. Claire smiled. I was being polite. She left before he could answer. Back in her room, she closed the door and leaned against it. The problem was no longer that Julian frightened her. The problem was that he was beginning not to. Days later, 3 unfamiliar men appeared at the estate on a Sunday afternoon. Claire heard them before she saw them. Raised voices near the entrance hall. She stepped onto the upstairs landing. Marco stood between the men and the hallway leading toward Julian's office. The man in front wore a navy suit and the expression of someone accustomed to entering rooms without permission. Tell Moretti that Mr. Santoro has finished waiting. Marco did not move. He knows where the phone is. The man's face hardened. This is not a request. A voice came from behind Marco. Then you chose the wrong house. Julian walked into the entrance hall. No jacket, no visible weapon, nothing in his hands. Still, the atmosphere changed immediately. The man recalculated. "Mr. Moretti, that is my name? We are here on behalf of Victor Santoro," I assumed. "He wants an answer. He will get one Tuesday." "Tuesday is not acceptable." Julian took one slow step forward. "Then Victor can spend Monday being disappointed." The room went silent. Claire watched from above. The man glanced toward the staircase. His eyes found her. Only for a second. Julian noticed. His expression did not change, but Marco shifted position. The message was clear. The man looked back at Julian. "Tuesday. Tuesday." The three men left. The front door closed. Julian stood still. Then he looked up. He saw Claire. "Come down." She descended the stairs. "Did you hear everything?" "Enough. I need you to pull the Santoro file." Claire nodded. They worked for nearly an hour. 6 separate contracts, 4 amendments, 2 side agreements. Claire found timeline language in 4 documents that could support Santoro's position. She found one clause buried in the original agreement that could undermine it. Julian read it twice. "Good catch." Claire looked at him. "You keep saying that. I keep meaning it." He leaned back in his chair. Claire gathered the files. "Is this dangerous?" Julian's expression changed, not because the question surprised him, because he was deciding how much truth to give. "Potentially." "To you?" "Yes." "To this house?" "Possibly." Claire nodded. She turned toward the door. "Claire." She stopped. Julian looked at her. "Were you afraid downstairs?" She considered it. "No." "You should have been." His tone was not patronizing. It was concerned. That affected her more than she wanted. "I will add it to my schedule." The corner of his mouth moved. Very funny. Claire left the office. At 7:43 that evening, her phone rang. Unknown number. Claire almost ignored it. Something made her answer. "Hello?" Her father's voice came through. "I know where you are." Claire stopped walking. She was halfway between her office and the staircase. The hallway seemed suddenly colder. Douglas continued. "I know exactly where you are, Claire." She said nothing. "You need to come home." "That is not my home. I am your father. I know. Moretti is using you." Claire closed her eyes. The same words. Again. Then Douglas said something different. "You have no idea what those people do to women who become inconvenient." Claire's eyes opened. "What did you say?" Silence. Douglas breathed into the phone. Claire looked toward Julian's office at the end of the corridor. "How do you know where I am?" "I told you I know things." "Who told you?" "That does not matter." Claire's pulse began to rise. For the first time since she had left Upper Darby, the fear did not feel like memory. It felt current. She ended the call. Then she blocked the number. She stood in the hallway for a long moment. Finally, she walked back to her office. The next morning, the mail arrived just before 9. Bills, contracts, a magazine Teresa never remembered ordering. One plain white envelope. No return address. Claire almost placed it in the general pile. Then she stopped. She opened it. A single photograph slid onto her desk. Claire stared at it. The image showed the front approach of the Moretti estate, taken from beyond the security gate. Through the iron bars. In the center of the frame, Claire was walking toward the house with a folder under one arm. The timestamp read, Tuesday, 3 days earlier. Claire turned the photograph over. 3 words were written across the back. "She lives here." Claire stopped breathing. Then she stood. She carried the photograph down the hall to Julian's office. She knocked once and entered. Julian was on the phone. He looked up, saw her face. He ended the call immediately. Claire placed the photograph on his desk. Julian picked it up, turned it over, read the words. His expression did not change. His eyes did. Claire had spent 2 weeks learning the difference. When did this arrive? This morning. Julian picked up his phone and sent one message, then another. Claire sat across from him. She had not been invited. Her legs did not care. Julian looked at her. "Are you all right?" Claire stared at the photograph between them. "I am trying to decide whether I should be scared." Julian answered without hesitation. "Yes." His voice lowered. This time you should be. Claire looked at him. Who knows I am here? Julian was quiet for 1 second. Then he said the name she had already begun to fear. Your father. Claire did not move. For several seconds, the only sound in Julian's office was the faint hum of the heating system behind the walls. Her father's name seemed to remain in the air between them. How? Julian set the photograph face down on his desk. Claire watched his hand. Steady. Too steady. Your father made contact with someone connected to Eddie Russo the night you arrived here. Claire stared at him. The night I arrived? Yes. You knew? I knew there had been contact. The words landed slowly. Claire felt the fear inside her rearrange itself into something hotter. You knew my father was talking to people around you? Yes. And you did not tell me. Julian did not look away. No. Claire stood. The movement was calm. Her pulse was not. She walked to the window because remaining in the chair suddenly felt impossible. Outside, 2 security men were already moving toward the front gate. Marco crossed the driveway with a phone against his ear. The entire estate was responding to a threat Claire had learned about less than 5 minutes ago. Everyone was moving. Everyone except Julian. He waited behind her. Claire looked at her reflection in the glass. How long were you planning to keep that from me? I was not planning to keep it from you. She turned. That is not an answer. Julian took a breath. I knew Douglas contacted Eddie's circle. I did not know what information he gave them. I wanted to verify it before I brought you something incomplete. Claire laughed once. There was no humor in it. You wanted to decide how much I needed to know. Yes. The honesty made her angrier. She crossed her arms. You said I could ask every question. You could. But you were going to decide which truths I was qualified to hear. His jaw tightened. I made the wrong decision. Claire stopped. She had expected an argument. Douglas always argued. If he hurt her, there was a reason. If he lied, she had forced him. If he broke something, someone else had provoked him. There was always a courtroom inside her father's head, and somehow he was always the judge. Julian simply stood there. I should have told you when I found out, he said. I did not. That was a mistake. Claire looked at him. No excuse, no demand that she understand, no attempt to make his intention erase the consequence. Her anger did not disappear, but it changed shape. What exactly did my father tell them? That is what Marco is confirming. And Eddie. I do not know yet whether Eddie made the first approach or whether someone used his name. Claire looked toward the photograph. You said they knew I was here. Yes. Since when? Your second day. She went still. My second day. Julian nodded. Claire looked at the picture again. She imagined herself moving through the estate those first weeks, coffee in hand, folders under her arm, standing at windows, walking through the gardens with Teresa, believing the gates meant privacy. Someone had been watching. Why send the photograph now? Julian came around the desk. He did not move closer to Claire. He stopped beside the chair she had left. Because this is not surveillance anymore. What is it? A message. I figured that part out. They are telling me they can identify something I value. Claire's eyes lifted to his. The room became very quiet. Something you value. Julian's expression did not change. Yes. Claire looked away first. She hated how much those 2 words affected her. Not now. She would deal with that later. Who is they? I believe Santoro is behind it. Because of the riverfront deal. Partly. Then give me the other part. Julian was silent for a moment. Santoro does not simply want a larger percentage of the development. Claire waited. He wants control. Why? Because control changes everything. That still sounds like a business answer. It is. No, it is the answer you give people when you do not want to give them the real one. Something almost resembling surprise passed through his eyes. Claire continued. You do not have to tell me your entire history with him, but if my phase is now being mailed through your front gate, I need enough information to understand why. Julian nodded once. Fair. He moved toward the bookshelf, then stopped with one hand resting against the edge of it. Victor Santoro and I built the Riverfront Partnership 11 years ago. At the time, he had political connections. I had capital. Legitimate capital. Julian looked at her. Mostly. Claire accepted that. He expected the arrangement to make him indispensable. Julian continued. It did not. Over time, my side acquired more property, more contracts, and more influence over the development. So he thinks you replaced him. He thinks I embarrassed him. Did you? A pause. Yes. Claire almost smiled. At least you know. He tried to force a vote 7 years ago. He lost. And now he wants another one. He wants enough ownership that a vote no longer matters. Claire looked at the photograph. And I am leverage. Julian did not soften the word. Potentially. Claire pressed her palms against the edge of the desk. Her breathing remained steady. She was proud of that. What happens now? You stay inside the estate until we know how they got close enough to take that photograph. Claire looked at him. That was not phrased like a request. No. Try again. His eyes narrowed slightly. Claire held his gaze. Julian exhaled. I'm asking you not to leave the property without Marco or another security escort until we know the level of the threat. Better. Claire. I am agreeing. He stopped. I am not stupid. I am angry. I know. Do not confuse those. I won't. Her office phone rang from down the hall. Neither of them moved. Then Julian's cell vibrated. Marco. Julian answered. Tell me. He listened. His expression became harder with every second. Claire watched. How certain? Another pause. Bring it here. He ended the call. Claire did not ask. Julian looked at her. We have more. Marco arrived 7 minutes later carrying a thin folder. He closed the office door behind him. Claire remained standing. Marco glanced at Julian. Julian nodded. Tell her. Marco looked at Claire. Your father has been talking to Eddie Russo's people longer than we thought. How long? About 3 months. The room shifted. Claire stared at him. 3 months. Marco placed the folder on Julian's desk. First confirmed contact was 6 weeks before Thanksgiving. Claire looked at Julian. He looked just as surprised as she felt. Marco opened the folder. Inside were phone records, meeting locations, names, dates. Douglas was approached through a man who handles outside work for Santoro, Marco said. The offer was simple. If your father could provide information useful to Santoro, they would arrange to clear his obligation to Julian. Claire looked down at the pages. What information? At first, general information. Julian's schedules, business visitors, which properties were active, which attorneys were handling specific matters. Claire's stomach tightened. My father did not have access to any of that. No, Marco said. But someone working inside a domestic or administrative position might. The words took a second to settle, then another. Claire looked at Julian. He wanted someone inside this house. Julian's eyes had gone cold. Yes. Claire felt something click into place. Not because the plan made perfect sense. Because Douglas did. Her father had always looked at the people around him as resources. Her mother had been emotional labor. Evelyn had been free childcare. Claire had been the daughter who fixed paperwork, made excuses, covered bills, answered late-night calls, absorbed anger, and came back for holidays no matter how ugly the previous one had been. Different currency. Same habit. He did not know you would offer me the job, Claire said. Marco shook his head. No. According to what we found, Douglas thought he could eventually pressure you into getting close enough to someone around Julian. Claire laughed softly. The sound frightened even her. But Julian walked into the house and solved the problem for him. Marco said nothing. He did not need to. Claire looked toward the window. The Thanksgiving night returned in fragments. Douglas hitting her, the doorbell, Julian walking in, her father's face changing, fear becoming calculation. She remembered how quickly Douglas had stopped drinking when Julian entered, how carefully he had listened to the offer, how immediately he had tried to answer for Claire. She had thought it was control. It had been control. But maybe it had been something else too. Opportunity. Claire turned back. He called them after I accepted. Marco nodded. Within an hour. Julian's face went completely still. Claire looked at him. You did not know that. No, she believed him. That almost made it worse. Her father had not merely taken advantage of her decision, he had monetized it. Claire sat down, this time deliberately. He wanted me to become an informant. Marco leaned one hip against the desk. He probably planned to rebuild contact with you slowly. Scare me? Most likely. Make me feel unsafe here. Yes. Then offer himself as the person I could trust. Marco nodded once. Claire remembered the voicemail. Men like him do not give things away. You need to understand who you are dealing with. Come home. She closed her eyes. Douglas had not been trying to protect her. He had been trying to make her afraid enough to reach for him. She opened her eyes again. And once I called him, Marco answered carefully. He would probably ask harmless questions first. Who comes to the house? When Julian leaves. Who handles contracts? Then he would slowly ask for more. Claire looked at her hands. They were steady. That surprised her. Julian moved closer to the desk. Claire. She raised her eyes. The contract is over. She frowned. What? I am terminating it. No. Your father's debt will be erased in full. No. You can leave today. Marco will take you wherever you want. Your apartment, your grandmother's a hotel, anywhere. Claire stood. I said no. Julian's jaw tightened. This has moved beyond the job you accepted. Yes. You were not hired to become a target. I know. I will not keep you here under these conditions. Claire stared at him. Keep me here. Julian stopped. You hear yourself. That is not what I meant. Then say what you mean. He looked at her for several seconds. I want you safe. Claire felt those words in her chest. She ignored the feeling. If I leave because Santoro mailed a photograph, then Santoro decided where I live. This is not about pride. No. Claire stepped closer. It is about choice. Julian said nothing. My father has been making decisions around my fear for most of my life. If he was angry, I changed rooms. If he was drinking, I changed plans. If he called, I answered because not answering created consequences. Her voice remained quiet. I am not doing that anymore. Claire, if the actual security assessment says I cannot safely work here, show me the assessment and I will listen. But do not move me around because you feel guilty. Something changed in his face. You think this is guilt? I think part of it is. He stared at her. Claire continued. You brought me here. Now someone is threatening me because I am close to you. You think that makes you responsible? It does. No, it makes them responsible. Silence. Marco looked between them, then wisely became interested in the window. Claire lowered her voice. I will follow security restrictions. I will not leave alone. I will not do anything reckless. But I am not disappearing because someone decided fear should move me. Julian's shoulders lowered by less than an inch. It was enough. Fine. Claire nodded. Fine. But Marco goes with you anywhere outside these gates. Agreed. You do not change plans without telling security. Agreed. If something feels wrong, you call. Agreed. Julian looked at her. And if I tell you to run? Claire considered. If you tell everyone to run, I run. His eyes sharpened. If you tell only me, then I ask why. Marco coughed into his fist. Julian looked at him. Marco's expression remained innocent. Claire returned to her office. For the first time since opening the envelope, she could breathe normally. She worked for 40 minutes before realizing she had read the same email 6 times. Claire closed the laptop. Her father had spent 3 months preparing to use her. The sentence was simple. Her mind kept refusing it. She had known Douglas could be selfish, cruel, manipulative. But there was something uniquely cold about planning. A slap could be blamed on alcohol. A scream could be blamed on anger. 3 months of phone calls could not. Those required calendar dates, decisions, repeated opportunities to stop. Claire pressed her palms flat against the desk. She did not cry. Not because crying would make her weak, because she did not feel sad yet. She felt empty. At 5:30, Teresa entered carrying tea. She placed it beside Claire's keyboard. Claire looked at the cup. Does everyone in this house know what? That my father sold access to me. Teresa's face did not change. I know enough. Claire looked down. Teresa pulled out the chair across from her desk and sat. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Teresa said, "My husband used to gamble." Claire looked up. Teresa stared toward the window. "Not like your father. He never hit me, never frightened the children, but money disappeared." Her mouth tightened. "Every time I found out he had a reason. Every time I believed the reason because believing it was easier than believing he had looked at the rent money and decided his hope mattered more than our safety." Claire listened. "He died 14 years ago," Teresa said. "I loved him. I was furious with him. Both were true." She looked at Claire. "People think betrayal kills love immediately." A faint shake of her head. "It does not always work that way." Claire swallowed. "What does time?" Teresa stood. She tapped the teacup once. "Drink before it gets cold." Then she left. The next attack did not come through the gate. It came through a reporter. 3 days later, Claire's phone began vibrating during breakfast. Unknown numbers, emails, messages on social media accounts she barely used. At first, she assumed someone had leaked her number. Then Teresa entered the dining room carrying a tablet. Her face was hard. Julian looked up. "What?" She placed the screen in front of him. Claire saw the headline. "Prominent Philadelphia businessman accused of holding debtor's daughter at private estate." For 1 second, the words did not make sense. Then they did. Claire read. The article described Julian's dispute with Douglas. It described Claire moving into Julian's estate. It described the 90-day employment agreement. It used words like coercion, control, vulnerable woman, debt arrangement. The facts were close enough to truth to make the lie stronger. Claire kept reading. An unnamed source claimed she had been isolated from family. Another claimed she could not leave without security. A third suggested the employment agreement was merely a cover. Julian took the tablet. His expression was deadly. "Who published it?" "Philadelphia Ledger Online," Teresa said. "Reporter is Hannah Price." Marco entered behind her. "We are tracing the source." Claire barely heard him. One sentence on the screen held her attention. "Family members have reportedly expressed concern for Ms. Bennett's safety." Claire laughed. This time everyone looked at her. "Family members." Julian put the tablet down. "We will handle it." Claire looked at him. "How? Lawyers first. And after that, we say nothing." Claire shook her head. "No." Julian's eyes narrowed. "No. If we say nothing, the article becomes the story. It will die. Maybe." She stood. "But until it does, I'm still the woman everyone else gets to describe." Julian leaned back. "Claire, you do not owe a reporter anything." "I know." "Then do not give them access to you." Claire looked at the headline again. For years, Douglas had told people who she was. Too sensitive, ungrateful, difficult, cold. Every description had served him. Now Santoro was doing the same thing with different language. Victim, prisoner, leverage. The words sounded kinder. They still took her choices away. Claire looked at Teresa. "Is Hannah Price legitimate?" Teresa glanced at Julian. Julian said nothing. "Yes," Teresa answered. "She is aggressive but legitimate." "Good." Julian stood. "What are you thinking?" Claire met his eyes. "I want to talk to her." "No." Claire lifted an eyebrow. Julian closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them again, his voice was controlled. "I strongly advise against it." "Better." Marco looked down to hide something that might have been a smile. Julian ignored him. "The reporter will ask about criminal allegations." "I will not answer those." "She will ask about your father." "I will answer what I choose." "She will try to make you emotional." "People have been doing that to me since childhood." Julian looked at her for a long moment. "What do you want to accomplish?" Claire considered. "I want one thing on record." "What?" "That I am here because I chose to be." The interview happened that afternoon in a private conference room at an attorney's office in Center City. Marco sat outside. Julian did not attend. Claire had insisted. Hannah Price was younger than Claire expected. Early 30s, dark hair, quick eyes. A recorder sat between them. "Are you currently employed by Julian Moretti?" "Yes." "Do you live at his private residence?" "For the duration of my contract." "Is your father's debt connected to that contract?" "Yes." Hannah watched her carefully. Do you understand why some people may find that concerning? Of course. Do you? Yes. Claire leaned forward slightly. That is why I read the contract before signing it. That is why I changed 3 clauses. That is why I had independent legal review. Hannah paused. You negotiated the agreement? Yes. Can you leave the estate? Yes. Then why do you have security with you today? Claire smiled without warmth. Because someone photographed me through the gate and mailed the picture to the house. The reporter's eyes sharpened. Who? I do not know. Do you believe it is connected to Mr. Moretti? I believe the person who sent it wanted him to see it. Hannah looked at her notes. Your father reportedly believes you are being manipulated. Claire went still. Did he tell you that I cannot identify sources? Then I cannot respond to unidentified intentions. A small pause. Hannah changed direction. Did Julian Moretti rescue you from an abusive situation? Claire looked at her. The question was, carefully phrased, almost sympathetic, still wrong. No. Hannah waited. Claire continued. He walked into my father's house at a specific moment. He offered me a job. That job gave you a way out. Yes. So why would you not call that rescue? Claire thought about Thanksgiving, the bruise, the card, the car at 9, the contract she had changed line by line. Because rescue suggested passivity, a person carried from danger, a body moved by someone stronger. That was not what had happened. Claire looked directly at the reporter. He opened a door. Hannah's pen stopped. Claire continued. I walked through it. Silence. And if you wanted to leave now, I would. Do you want to know? Why? Claire almost answered too quickly. Because I am good at my work. Because the house is quiet. Because Teresa makes tea without asking. Because Marco pretends not to care and always notices when she works too late. Because Julian Moretti looks at her as though her words weigh exactly as much as his. She chose the safest truth. Because I have work I intend to finish. The interview ran for 38 minutes. When Claire returned to the estate, Julian was waiting in his office. He had already received a call from the attorney. How did it go? She asked good questions. That was not what I asked. Claire set her purse on the chair. I did not embarrass you. I am not worried about embarrassment. I know. Julian looked at her. You told her about the photograph. Yes. His jaw tightened. I would have preferred you didn't. I know. Why did you? Because it explains why I have security without allowing someone else to call security evidence that I am being held. Julian said nothing. Claire stepped closer to the desk. You are angry. Yes. At me? No. Then what? He turned away. For several seconds she thought he would not answer. Then he spoke. I should have ended the contract the moment I realized you were becoming leverage. Claire's chest tightened. We already had this argument. This is not the same argument. It sounds familiar. Julian turned back. His restraint looked thinner than she had ever seen it. You were photographed because you live in my house. I know. You are being written about because you work for me. I know. Your father is helping men who would use you to get to me. I know. His voice dropped. And I care what happens to you more than I should. Claire stopped. There it was. No careful language, no professional distance. The room seemed to narrow around them. Claire could hear the clock on the wall. Julian looked at her as though he regretted saying it and refused to take it back. Claire swallowed. More than you should. Yes. According to who? His eyes moved over her face. According to common sense. Claire's pulse climbed. She stepped around the chair. That has not been particularly useful to either of us lately. Julian did not smile. She was close enough now to see the faint line where the cut from the Santoro meeting had healed. Close enough to smell coffee and cedar. Close enough that moving another step would mean something. Julian stayed perfectly still. That mattered. He did not reach for her, did not use the silence as permission. He waited. Claire's gaze dropped briefly to his mouth, then back to his eyes. Her contract flashed through her mind. 90 days, defined terms, boundaries, a beginning with an "and" written into it. She stopped herself. My contract has 58 days left. Something changed in Julian's face. Not disappointment exactly, recognition. I know. Claire stepped back. So do I. Neither of them apologized. The door opened 2 days later without anyone knocking. Marco entered Julian's office. Santoro is at the gate. Julian looked up. Alone. 3 vehicles. Claire stood from the side table where she had been reviewing invoices. Expected. No. Julian's expression hardened. Bring him to the front sitting room. Marco nodded. Julian looked at Claire. You stay here. Claire stared at him. He sighed. That sounded worse out loud. Much. I am asking you to remain in the office. Why? Because Victor came here for a reason. Claire closed the folder. And I am part of the reason. Julian did not answer. That was answer enough. I am coming. Claire. If he is using me as leverage, I want to see the person holding the other end. Julian looked at her for several seconds. Stay beside Marco. Agreed. Victor Santoro was waiting when they entered. He was older than Claire expected. Late 40s, silver at his temples, expensive charcoal suit, polished shoes. A face that would have looked pleasant if the eyes belonged to someone else. 2 men stood behind him. Santoro rose. Julian. Victor. His gaze moved to Claire. No surprise. That irritated her. So this is Claire Bennett. Claire said nothing. Santoro smiled. I have heard a great deal about you. Claire took the chair beside Marco. I doubt most of it was accurate. Santoro's smile widened. Julian sat across from him. Why are you here? Victor placed a leather folder on the table. Because Tuesday came and went. You received my attorney's response. I did. And I found it unpersuasive. Julian leaned back. Then you should hire better people to explain it. Santoro laughed softly. I missed this. I didn't. Victor opened the folder. He placed several photocopied documents on the table. Claire looked at them. Old corporate records, transfer authorizations, property holding agreements, 15 years old, maybe more. Julian did not touch them. What am I looking at? You know? Humor me. Santoro pointed to a signature. Transfers through 3 shell companies connected to your early acquisitions. Julian's face remained blank. Old news. Not to federal investigators. Claire looked from Santoro to Julian. Victor continued. Especially when the transaction records appear to show money entering legitimate redevelopment projects from sources your lawyers would prefer never to discuss. Julian said nothing. Santoro smiled. 60%. There it was. Not negotiation. A price. Julian leaned forward. No. Victor's smile disappeared. This is not the same offer I made last month. I know. The documents change the situation. No, they change your confidence. Santoro's eyes hardened, then moved to Claire. You are an expensive employee, Ms. Bennett. Julian became very still. Marco shifted beside her. Claire felt the entire room tighten. She answered before either man could. And you are overestimating your bargaining position. Victor looked at her. For the first time, his smile was genuine. Interested. Am I? Claire looked at the documents. One page had been stamped with an old internal filing code, a sequence of letters and numbers. She had seen it before. Not in Julian's current records, in Eddie Russo's archived correspondence, a folder Claire had reorganized during her first week. Her heartbeat changed. She did not look at Julian. Not yet. Victor gathered the pages. Think about 60%. Julian's voice was cold. I already did. Santoro stood. So did I. He buttoned his jacket. His eyes passed over Claire once more. Then he left. Marco waited until the front door closed. That went well. Julian ignored him. Claire was already moving. She crossed to the table and picked up the page Victor had left behind. Claire. She stared at the filing code. Letters, numbers, a date marker. She knew exactly why it looked familiar. Julian came closer. What is it? Claire turned the page toward him. This code. What about it? I have seen it before. Marco stepped closer. Where? Claire looked at Julian. In Eddie Russo's archive. Julian's expression changed. Claire's pulse beat hard against her ribs. She could see the old filing room in her mind, the mislabeled boxes, the strange gaps. One set of records marked closed even though the corresponding index remained active. She remembered thinking it was careless. Now she understood it might have been deliberate. Claire placed one finger beneath the code. "I know where the originals are." Julian did not react immediately. Marco did. "Where?" Claire kept her eyes on the filing code. "Not here." Julian stepped closer. "What do you mean?" She carried the page toward the desk and opened her laptop. "During my first week, I reorganized Eddie's archived correspondence. There were references to an old records facility connected to one of your dissolved holding companies." Julian frowned. "Delaware Avenue." "No, that one closed 8 years ago," Claire typed quickly. "Another location." Marco came around the desk. "I did not know we had another location." "That is because officially you do not." Claire pulled up an old vendor invoice. The document had been buried beneath maintenance records. Storage fees were being paid through a company called Keystone Document Services. Julian looked at the screen. "Never heard of it." "I had not either." Claire opened a second record. "Until I noticed it appears every 3 months in Eddie's expense files." Marco leaned closer. "How much?" "Small amounts, never enough to attract attention." Julian's voice became quiet. "Which is why nobody did." Claire nodded. "The account is still active." She searched again. "Here." An address appeared. "An industrial block near the river in Port Richmond." Marco pulled out his phone. "I will send a team." "No." Julian looked at him. Marco stopped. Julian's eyes remained on Claire. "If Eddie maintained an archive nobody else knew about, there may be an access alert." Claire nodded. "Exactly." Marco lowered his phone. "So we walk in blind." "We do not walk in at all yet." Claire turned the laptop. "The billing account includes a client portal." Julian looked at her. "You can access it. Maybe." "Maybe" is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Claire ignored him. She clicked through several pages. The portal required an account number and authentication code. Claire searched Eddie's old records. Julian watched her. "How long will this take?" "I do not know." "Claire." She looked up. "If you want fast, guess the password yourself." Marco coughed. Julian stared at her. Claire returned to the screen. 30 seconds later, Marco said, "I am starting to understand why Teresa likes her." Julian gave him a look. Marco became silent. Claire found the account number inside an old invoice. The access code was more difficult. She tried an archived vendor identifier, rejected. A company registration number, rejected. Then she remembered the strange date sequence in Eddie's old filing labels. Not creation dates, not expiration dates, dates attached to people. Claire typed one. The portal opened. Marco stared at the screen. That was concerning. Claire exhaled slowly. It was his father's birthday. Julian looked at her. "How did you know that?" "I did not." She opened the account profile. "I guessed." Marco shook his head. "Somehow that is worse." The portal contained little. Monthly payments, unit number, access history. Claire opened the latest log. Her stomach tightened. Someone had entered the storage unit that morning. 8:17. Again at 11:42. Marco saw it too. "They are cleaning it out." Julian picked up his phone. "Now you send the team." Marco was already moving. Claire stopped him. "Wait." Both men looked at her. She opened another tab. "What?" "The account has remote inventory services." Marco frowned. "What does that mean?" "They scan box labels when records are added or removed." Claire opened the list. Dozens of numbered containers appeared. Some had been marked transferred, others destroyed. One entry stood out. Unit 12, Box KDS 4419, status pending transfer. Claire clicked it. The internal description read Moretti Riverfront Holdings, original acquisition records, legal retention. Julian became completely still. "That is it." Claire nodded. The transfer request had been submitted that morning. Pickup scheduled for 6. Marco checked his watch. 4:20. Julian looked at him. "Take Nate and Chris." Marco nodded. "Nobody touches Eddie until we know where he is." Marco paused. "You think he is involved?" I think Victor showed up with documents that came from a filing system Eddie controlled. Julian's voice hardened. That is enough to ask questions. Marco left. Claire remained at the desk. Julian looked toward the door, then back at her. You are done for today. Claire stared at him. No. Claire, I am the only person who understands how Eddie organized these records. We have the location. You have one box. She pointed at the screen. If Santoro altered documents, we need to know which originals matter before your people start carrying 30 years of paper through Philadelphia. Julian's expression tightened. I do not want you involved in the retrieval. I did not say I was going. You were thinking it. I was. No, Claire folded her arms. That sounded like an order. It was. She held his gaze. Then give me a reason that is not fear. Julian stepped closer. The reason is that Santoro's people may already be there. That is a good reason. You agree? I agree I should not physically enter the building. Julian paused. Claire sat back down. I can guide Marco from here. His shoulders relaxed slightly. Fine. Fine. Julian turned toward his office. Claire spoke. You should call your attorney. I already did. While you were arguing with Marco. Claire stared at him. He almost smiled. They worked from separate rooms for the next 40 minutes. Claire mapped the archive from the vendor portal. Marco called from the vehicle. We are 5 minutes out. Claire had him on speaker. Julian stood beside her desk. Front entrance has keypad access, Claire said. Unit 12 is in the rear section. Marco's voice came through. Any cameras? Interior hallway cameras. No live feed on this account. Convenient. Claire zoomed into the facility plan. There is a secondary loading entrance on the east side. Julian looked at her. How many exits? 3. Marco answered before Julian could. We have 4 people. Julian's jaw tightened. Do not engage unless necessary. Understood. Claire heard vehicle doors, footsteps, then silence. Her eyes remained on the laptop. A notification appeared. Account access detected. Someone had opened the storage client portal from another device. Claire sat forward. Marco, yeah, someone just logged into the account. From where, it does not show. Julian leaned toward the screen. Claire refreshed. The status beside box 44119 changed. Pending transfer became active removal. Her pulse jumped. They are moving the box. Marco's voice changed. We are inside. Claire looked at the facility map. Rear section, 3rd corridor, Unit 12. Footsteps echoed faintly through the speaker. Then Marco said, Door is open. Julian's expression sharpened. Claire heard another voice in the distance. Then movement. A crash. Julian reached for the phone. Marco. We are good. Another sound. 2 men. One is running. Nate. On him. Claire stared at the screen. The inventory page refreshed again. Box 44119 disappeared. Her stomach dropped. The box was checked out. Marco answered, breath slightly heavier now. There are 6 boxes here. Look for 4419. A pause. Not here. Claire looked at Julian. Someone already moved it. When she searched the access log, a second location code appeared beside the transfer. Off-site legal retention. Claire froze. Julian saw her face. What? Claire opened the transfer details. The physical archive was a decoy, Marco's voice came through, meaning, the box was transferred digitally this morning, but the original records were sent somewhere else last month. Julian leaned closer. Where? Claire read the code. Then she remembered. One of Julian's oldest attorneys maintained a private document vault beneath his Center City office. She looked at Julian. Whitmore Legal. His expression changed instantly. That is impossible. Why? Because Whitmore has represented my family for 23 years. Claire clicked the transfer record. Then either he knows or someone used his archive authorization. Julian called the attorney. No answer. He called again. Nothing. Marco spoke through the speaker. Want us downtown? Julian looked at the time. Yes, Claire interrupted. No, Julian turned. What now? Whitmore's building uses scheduled document release. How do you know? The transfer request says external retrieval requires dual authorization. She pointed at the screen. One from the legal custodian and one from the client representative. Julian understood. Eddie. Claire nodded. If Eddie is the client representative, he cannot remove anything without someone inside Whitmore signing off. Marco's voice came through. So find Eddie. Julian's eyes hardened. I know where he is. Claire looked at him. How? He has dinner with his daughter every Thursday. Marco swore quietly. Julian picked up his jacket. Claire stood. You are going. Yes. With Marco. Marco goes to Whitmore. Claire stared at him. You are going alone. No. He reached for his phone. Chris comes with me. Claire stepped in front of the doorway. Julian stopped. What? Do not turn this into anger. His eyes narrowed. Eddie has worked for me 6 years. I know. If he betrayed me, then finding out why matters more than making him afraid of you. Julian looked at her. I am not going there to frighten him. Claire's expression said she did not believe that. Julian exhaled. Move. Say it. What? Say you are going there for information. His jaw tightened. Claire, say it. Julian stared at her long enough that most people would have moved. Claire did not. Finally he said, I am going there for information. She stepped aside. Good. Julian paused beside her. You are becoming a serious problem. Claire looked up at him. I have been told. He left. Eddie Russo was sitting in a corner booth at a small Italian restaurant in South Philadelphia when Julian walked in. His daughter was not there. That told Julian enough. Eddie saw him immediately. The color left his face. Julian crossed the room. Chris remained near the entrance. Eddie stood. Julian, sit. Eddie sat. Julian took the chair across from him. For several seconds, neither spoke. The restaurant continued around them. Silverware. Quiet conversation. A waiter carrying wine. Ordinary life moving around two men whose conversation could destroy several lives. Julian placed his phone on the table. Victor Santoro showed me old riverfront documents today. Eddie's face did not move. Julian watched carefully. The filing code came from your archive. Still nothing. Eddie, I do not know what you want me to say. The truth would be efficient. Eddie looked toward the window. Julian leaned back. You have been with me 6 years. I know. I paid for your mother's treatment. Eddie's jaw tightened. I know. I put your daughter through school. I know. Then explain why Santoro has records you were responsible for. Eddie looked back at him. Something inside the man finally cracked. Not guilt, fear. He had me before I came to you. Julian became still. What does that mean? Eddie swallowed. 15 years ago, I worked for one of Victor's accountants. Julian said nothing. I moved paperwork, opened companies, closed companies, signed things I did not understand. His voice dropped. One of those signatures connects me to money that disappeared. How much? Enough. And Santoro kept the evidence. Eddie nodded. He said if I stopped helping him, he would give it to the government. Julian stared at him. For 6 years. Not at first. When? Last year. Julian's hands remained flat on the table. You could have told me. Eddie laughed bitterly. And say what? That you hired a man Victor already owned. Yes. Eddie looked at him. You would have killed me. Julian's expression did not change. Did you believe that? Eddie was silent. That answer hurt more than Julian expected. He leaned back. Douglas Bennett. Eddie's eyes lowered. Julian's voice became colder. You brought him in. Victor wanted someone close to you. So you used Claire's father. I made contact. Julian's jaw tightened. Did you know Douglas would use his daughter? Not at first. At first. Eddie looked miserable. When she moved into the estate, Victor changed the plan. Julian's voice dropped. And you let him. Eddie looked at him. What was I supposed to do? Julian stood. Call me. Eddie laughed once. You make loyalty sound simple. No. Julian looked down at him. I make choices sound simple. He picked up his phone. You chose. Eddie stared at the table. Julian walked away. He did not threaten him, did not touch him, did not raise his voice. For Eddie, that was worse. At the estate, Claire was still at her desk when Julian returned after 10. She heard his footsteps, slower than usual. He entered without knocking. Claire looked up. Was it Eddie? Julian nodded. She closed the laptop. How bad? He remained standing. 6 years? Claire waited. Julian stared toward the window. He was compromised before I hired him. Did he have a choice? Everyone has a choice. The answer came too quickly. Claire studied him. That was not what I asked. Julian looked at her. He thought Santoro would expose him if he stopped cooperating. Would he? Yes. Claire nodded slowly. And you are angry because he betrayed you. Yes. But you are also angry because he thought you would kill him if he told you. Julian's eyes hardened. Claire stood. That part hurts. He said nothing. She walked closer. Not too close. Because you believed he knew you. Julian looked away. Claire understood. People feared Julian. He knew that. Used it. Built power from it. But Eddie had sat at his table, worked beside him, taken his help, known the man behind the name, and still believed fear would matter more than trust. Claire reached out. Her fingers touched Julian's wrist. The contact was brief, intentional. He looked down at her hand. Claire nearly pulled away. Instead, she kept it there. We deal with Eddie first. Julian looked at her. You can feel betrayed afterward. Something moved across his face, a tired, almost smile. You are becoming dangerous. Claire let go. I had a good teacher. At 11:14, Marco called. The Whitmore archive had been accessed, not by the senior attorney, by a junior records manager whose credentials had been stolen. The original documents were still inside. Santoro's people had obtained digital copies and selectively altered several pages. More importantly, the authentic records contained transactions Santoro had omitted, payments through companies he controlled, approvals carrying his signatures. If Julian went down, Santoro went with him. Claire spent the next hour comparing the records. At 12:20, she found the detail that changed everything. Julian. He came into her office. She pointed at 2 documents. Santoro changed the dates. Julian leaned closer. Claire placed the copies side by side. His version makes it look like your company initiated the transfer. And the original, his company moved the money 3 days earlier. Julian looked at the signatures. So he created the appearance that I funded the acquisition. Yes. But he actually did. Yes. Julian's eyes sharpened. Claire opened another record. And this authorization proves he knew exactly where the money came from. Julian stared at the page, then at her. You just destroyed his leverage. Claire shook her head. No. He frowned. I found the documents. She closed the folder. You still have to make him understand it. The meeting happened the following evening in a private conference room above a restaurant near Rittenhouse Square. Victor Santoro arrived first. 2 attorneys sat beside him. Julian entered with his own counsel. Claire walked beside him. Victor's eyes immediately found her. Still employed. Claire took her seat. Very. Santoro smiled. You really should learn when you are being used. Claire opened a folder. You first. The smile faded. Julian sat. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Julian placed 2 files on the table. Your documents. Santoro glanced at them. And Julian placed another folder beside them. The originals. Victor did not move. One of his attorneys did. A tiny shift. Enough. Claire saw it. So did Julian. Victor leaned back. You are bluffing. Claire opened the first document. March 14th, then the second. Your copy says March 17th. She slid both across. That is not a scanning error. Santoro looked at the pages. Claire continued. Your company initiated the transfer before Moretti Riverfront Holdings received the funds. Victor's expression hardened. Julian spoke. You wanted 60%. Silence. You are not getting it. Santoro looked at him. Julian's voice stayed quiet. You are going to withdraw the ownership claim. Victor laughed. Or what? Julian pushed the final folder forward. Or my attorney sends this to every investigator you plan to impress with your version. Santoro did not touch it. Julian leaned back. The difference between us, Victor, is that you needed me guilty alone. A pause. The originals make us both interesting. Santoro's face changed. For the first time, Claire saw fear. Small, controlled, real. Victor looked at Claire. You did this. Claire met his eyes. I read. He stared at her, then laughed softly. You think sitting beside him makes you safe? Julian's expression hardened. Claire answered first. No. Santoro waited. Claire continued. I think knowing where I chose to sit makes me difficult to move. Victor's smile disappeared. He stood. His attorneys gathered the folders. Julian did not. 40% remains 40%, Julian said. Victor paused. Be grateful I am leaving you that. Santoro looked back. For 1 second, Claire thought he might say something. He did not. He walked out. The room remained quiet after the door closed. Julian's attorney exhaled. That could have gone worse. Claire looked at him. That is your professional assessment. It is after midnight. Julian almost smiled. 2 days later, Claire's father was waiting outside her old office. She had gone there with Marco to collect personal files and officially arrange an extended leave. Douglas stood beside his truck. Claire saw him before he saw her. He looked smaller. His coat hung loose. His face had the gray exhaustion of a man who had spent several days drinking badly and sleeping worse. Then he noticed Claire. Claire. Marco stopped beside her. Douglas looked at him. I need to talk to my daughter. Marco looked at Claire. Her decision. Claire appreciated that. I will be inside. Marco moved toward the building but stayed close enough to see them. Douglas stepped forward. I have been calling. I blocked you. I know. Claire waited. Her father looked around the parking lot as though searching for the version of the conversation he had rehearsed. These people are dangerous. So are you. Douglas flinched. I am your father. The words arrived automatically. Claire had heard them hundreds of times, after insults, after broken promises, after money disappeared, after apologies that were never apologies. Something inside her remained completely still. I know. I made mistakes. Yes. I was desperate. Claire said nothing. Douglas stepped closer. Santoro told me he would clear everything. And you believed him. I was trying to save the house. No. His face tightened. Claire, you were trying to save yourself. I did everything for this family. The old sentence. The oldest one. Claire almost felt tired. Douglas continued. Your mother understood that. Claire's expression changed. He saw it, mistook it for weakness. She knew how hard I worked. She knew the pressure I was under. Do not. Douglas stopped. Claire's voice was low. Do not use her. I am telling you the truth. No. She stepped closer. Mom spent years protecting everyone from your moods. Douglas looked angry now. Your mother loved me. Yes, Claire swallowed. And that did not make what you did to her acceptable. His face changed. She would hate what you are doing. There it was, the final weapon. Claire felt the old instinct rise, defend herself, explain, convince him. Then she saw the pattern. Douglas needed her inside the argument, because as long as she argued, he still had access. Claire stopped. Her voice became almost gentle. You were supposed to be my father. Douglas stared at her. I am. Claire shook her head. No. His mouth opened. She continued. Being my father was supposed to mean I was safer when you were in the room. The words came slowly. You taught me the opposite. Douglas looked as though she had struck him. For a moment Claire felt sorrow. Real sorrow. Not for the man standing in front of her. For the father she had kept waiting for. The father who might stop drinking, might apologize, might remember her birthday without asking Evelyn, might call because he missed her instead of because he needed something. That man had never existed. Claire had spent years grieving him without admitting he was imaginary. Douglas stepped forward. Claire, please. She moved back. 1 step. Enough. I am done. His face collapsed. What does that mean? It means you do not call me. Claire, you do not come to my apartment. I am your father. You already said that. Her eyes burned. She did not look away. You do not contact my employer. You do not ask Grandma where I am. You do not use Mom's name to make me feel guilty for leaving. Douglas stared at her. And if I need you, Claire looked at him for a long moment. That question told her everything. Not if she needed him. If he needed her. She turned toward the building. Claire. She stopped, but did not turn. Douglas's voice cracked. What am I supposed to do now? Claire closed her eyes. For most of her life, that question would have dragged her back. She would have made a plan, called someone, found money, fixed paperwork, absorbed the crisis. She opened her eyes. I don't know. Then she walked away. Marco opened the building door for her. He did not ask if she was all right. She was grateful. That evening, Julian found Claire in the piano room. She was sitting on the floor beside the bench. The room was dark except for one lamp. A recording of soft piano music played from an old speaker. Julian stopped at the doorway. Teresa said you were in here. Claire looked at the piano. I hope you do not mind. No, he entered. How did it go? Claire rested her head against the side of the bench. I told him not to contact me. Julian sat in the chair across from her. How do you feel? I do not know. Fair. Claire looked toward him. He asked what he was supposed to do without me. Julian said nothing. I spent my entire life thinking he needed me because I mattered. Her voice weakened slightly. Maybe he needed me because I was useful. Julian leaned forward. Those are not the same thing. I know. Claire looked at her hands. The debt is cleared. Completely. Even though the contract is not finished. Yes. She nodded. For months that number had seemed enormous. $465,000. A mountain, a chain. Now it meant almost nothing. Claire laughed quietly. I thought that was what kept me tied to him. The debt. Responsibility. She looked up. It was not. Julian waited. I kept hoping. Her eyes filled. This time she did not fight it. I kept thinking eventually he would become someone I could forgive. One tear moved down her cheek. Claire wiped it away. Julian did not tell her not to cry. He did not move until she looked at him. Then he held out his hand. Nothing more. An offer. Claire stared at it. She took it. Julian helped her stand. She remained close. Closer than she had before. Their hands stayed together. Claire looked at his face. I told him you did not rescue me. Julian's eyes moved over hers. You were right. You keep saying that. Because you keep being right. Claire smiled through the remaining tears. That must be exhausting. It is becoming unbearable. She laughed. The sound broke something open between them. Julian lifted his free hand, stopped before touching her. Claire saw the question. She answered by stepping closer. His fingertips rested against her cheek. The same side Douglas had struck on Thanksgiving. The bruise was gone now. Julian touched her as though he remembered exactly where it had been. Claire closed her eyes. No grabbing, no taking, no assumption. When she opened them, his face was inches from hers. You should know something, Julian said. What? I have wanted to do this for longer than is professionally appropriate. Claire's mouth almost curved. How much longer? I am not answering that. Coward. Careful. His thumb moved lightly along her cheek. Claire's breath caught. She leaned forward. Julian met her halfway. The kiss was quiet. No urgency, no dramatic collision, just warmth. His hand remained against her face. Claire's fingers curled into the front of his shirt. For several seconds, everything else disappeared. Santoro, Douglas, contracts, Gates, debt, fear. Then Claire pulled back. Julian's forehead rested against hers. His breathing was less controlled than usual. That pleased her more than it should have. 41 days, she whispered. Julian opened his eyes. What? My contract. He stared at her. Claire stepped back slightly. 41 days remain. You cannot be serious. I am completely serious. For once, Julian Moretti looked genuinely offended. Claire, you wanted clear boundaries. I am reconsidering my position. She smiled. Too late. You negotiated the contract. Exactly. Julian looked toward the ceiling. Claire laughed. He looked back at her. I have men who refuse to sit across a table from me. I know. Victor Santoro left a room because I told him to. I was there, and somehow I am being defeated by a calendar. Claire stepped close again. She kissed him once, short, deliberate, then moved away. "Good night, Julian." He stared after her. "Claire." She reached the doorway. "Yes." His expression softened. Not the feared man from Philadelphia, not the head of an organization, just Julian. "Good night." Claire walked into the hallway. Behind her, the piano continued playing softly. For the first time since Thanksgiving, the number of days remaining on her contract no longer felt like a countdown toward freedom. It was simply 41 days. And for once, Claire Bennett was in no hurry to make a choice before she was ready. The 41 days passed more quietly than Claire expected. Not peacefully. Julian Moretti did not live a peaceful life. Phones still rang before sunrise. Meetings still stretched past dinner. Marco still entered rooms with the expression of a man carrying information nobody wanted. Teresa still complained that everyone in the house believed coffee could replace sleep. But something inside Claire had changed. She no longer woke every morning waiting for danger to explain itself. She simply woke. She worked. She argued with Julian about contracts. She moved meetings he insisted could not be moved. She found errors his accountants had missed and sent documents back when the language was vague. Julian stopped asking whether she was certain. Eventually, he started asking what she recommended. That difference mattered. One afternoon, Claire entered his office carrying a stack of vendor agreements. "You approved this one." Julian looked up. "Did I?" "Unfortunately." She placed it in front of him. "The termination language is terrible." "How terrible?" "You could lose 6 months of payments if they walk away." Julian read the clause. His expression darkened. "Who drafted this?" "You signed it." "That was not my question," Claire smiled. "Your attorney." Julian reached for the phone. Claire put her hand over it. "No." He looked at her hand, then at her. "What? Do not terrify him. He is paid not to make mistakes. So correct the mistake." Julian leaned back. "You are interfering with one of the few pleasures available to me. Professional accountability. Fear." Claire laughed. She had started doing that more often, not carefully, not after checking the room, just because something was funny. Julian watched her. He did that sometimes, not in the way Douglas had watched her looking for a weakness or a mistake. Julian watched as though he was still surprised she existed inside his house. Claire pretended not to notice. She noticed everything. On day 72, Evelyn came to visit. Claire almost canceled twice. She did not know what it would feel like to bring someone from the Bennett house into this one. Julian made the decision easier by leaving for the afternoon. Not because Claire asked, because he understood she needed space. Evelyn stood in the entrance hall holding her purse with both hands. Her eyes moved across the stone floor, the staircase, the quiet rooms. Then she looked at Claire. "You look different." Claire touched her hair. "Different how? Like you sleep." Claire laughed softly. "I do now." They had coffee in the sitting room. For 10 minutes they spoke about safe things. Weather, Evelyn's neighbor. A cousin Claire had not seen in months. Finally, Evelyn put down her cup. "I owe you an apology." Claire became still. Her grandmother looked at her hands. "Not one of those apologies people make because they want the room to become comfortable again." Claire waited. Evelyn raised her eyes. "I saw what your father did." Thanksgiving returned for a second. The table, the slap, her grandmother closing her eyes. Evelyn continued. "I saw other things before that too." Claire said nothing. "I told myself staying quiet kept him calm." Her voice trembled. "I told myself if I challenged him he would become worse." Claire looked at her. "And maybe he would have." Evelyn's eyes filled. "But I let that become an excuse." Claire swallowed. "I was afraid too." "I know." Evelyn shook her head. "You were the child." Claire looked toward the window. Years ago she would have rushed to comfort her grandmother. She would have said it was fine. It was not fine, so she did not. After a long silence, Claire said, "I love you." Evelyn nodded, tears moving down her face. "I love you too." "That does not erase it." "I know." Claire looked back at her. That answer was enough to continue the conversation, not enough to repair everything, but enough to begin. On day 89, Claire barely slept. Not because she wanted to leave, because she knew she did not. That frightened her in a different way. She stood at her window before dawn. The estate grounds were dark. The trees were bare. The same landscape she had looked at on her first morning. Back then she had counted the days until she could walk away. Now she was counting one. Claire had spent most of her life reacting to other people. Douglas became angry, so Claire became quiet. Her mother became sick, so Claire became responsible. Julian offered a job, so Claire evaluated the terms. Santoro threatened her, so Claire refused to move. Every choice had existed beside a problem. Tomorrow there would be no problem forcing an answer. Only Claire. That was harder. Day 90 arrived cold and clear. Claire entered Julian's office at 9. He was standing beside the window. He turned. On his desk sat her original contract, 14 pages, her handwriting in the margins, every amendment, every condition. Claire placed another document beside it. Julian looked down. "What is that?" "My proposal." He looked at her. "You wrote a proposal." "Obviously." "For what?" Claire pushed it toward him. "Read." Julian sat. Claire remained standing. He read the first page, then the second. His eyebrows rose slightly. Higher salary. Appropriate salary. Profit participation. For legitimate businesses I help manage. Independent legal counsel. You have several lawyers. I want one who works for me. Julian turned another page. Separate residence available at your discretion. Claire nodded. I am not becoming dependent on your house. He read the next clause. No connection to Douglas Bennett or any remaining obligation associated with him. That part is not negotiable. Julian looked up. I would not negotiate it. Claire held his eyes. He returned to the document. At the bottom of the final page was one additional provision, defined executive authority over operations for selected Moretti companies. Julian leaned back. You do not want to be my assistant. No. What do you want to be? Claire answered without hesitation. Useful enough that you cannot afford to ignore me. The corner of his mouth moved. That sounds expensive. It is. Julian looked at the proposal again. You wrote this on day 73. Claire frowned. How do you know that? Document creation date. She stared at him. You checked the metadata. I learned from you. Claire almost laughed. Julian placed the pages down. Then his expression became serious. If there were no job, would you stay? Claire had expected the question. She had still not prepared for how vulnerable it sounded. If there were no job, I would not live in your house. Something in Julian's face closed slightly. Claire continued. But I would still come here. He looked at her. I would still argue with you. A pause. I would still want dinner with Teresa and Marco. Another. And I would still want you. Julian did not move. Claire stepped closer. I am not staying because you saved me. I know. I am staying because I chose a life I want. His voice was quiet. And I am in it. Yes. Julian looked down for a moment. When he looked back, something had changed. Relief. Maybe disbelief. He signed the proposal, then opened the top drawer of his desk. He removed a brass key. Claire looked at it. What is that master key? To the estate. Every exterior door, most interior rooms. Claire stared at him. Most? The wine cellar has a separate lock because Teresa does not trust Marco. Correctly. Julian stood. He placed the key in Claire's palm. She looked down at it. This is not in the contract. No. Then what is it? Julian closed her fingers around the key. An invitation. Claire looked at him. His thumb rested against her hand. Not an obligation. The words hit deeper than he probably intended. Claire stepped closer. I love you. Julian went completely still. For once she had surprised him. Claire smiled. You look terrified. I am evaluating the situation. Poorly. He touched her face. I love you too. Claire's smile faded into something softer. Good. That is all I get. You want applause? Julian pulled her closer. No. He kissed her. This time there was no countdown. No contract between them. No number of days left. Months later, Thanksgiving returned. Teresa complained about the turkey. Marco stole bread from the kitchen. Evelyn sat beside Claire at the table. Julian poured wine. The room was loud, warm, imperfect. Nobody was pretending. Then the doorbell rang. Claire's body reacted before her mind did. One brief tightening in her chest. An old memory. A different Thanksgiving. A different door. Julian noticed. He did not stand. He did not answer it for her. Claire looked at him. He simply waited. She rose from the table, walked through the hallway, placed her hand on the door. 1 year earlier, someone else had opened a door into her life. This time, Claire opened it herself.